All right, it is our birthday here at the Lost and Found podcast. It was 1 year ago today that I released the very first episode with Zack Blakeney, and he's back 1 year later to celebrate the anniversary episode. And we get into some amazing topics. As usual, Zack doesn't disappoint. And there were some pretty wild synchronicities on the things that he actually wanted to discuss today, and how that was perfectly aligned with some of the things I was writing this morning, which was really perceiving the world through energy and like our energetic state and what that leads to, and how we actually can think from the heart rather than the mind. Zack shared some absolute gems as always, and I just know you're going to love this episode. One other thing, so something else that I wanted to say. So before we get started, one thing I want to say is that I did start this a year ago and I committed to it. I'm 1 year in, and it really has led to some incredible opportunities with people that I've met, places that I've been to, invitations into certain groups. And it really is just getting started right now. Behind the scenes, I'm working on some pretty amazing stuff with some people, some of which have been on the podcast and some which I'm sure to come on. And I just want to say, if you're thinking about doing something, if there's something in you that is being called, that wants to be birthed and expressed through you, that is an expression of who you are uniquely, then answer the call. If you hear that whisper, say yes, because so many people go their entire life where they don't, where they always feel it, but they actually never really answer or they step into it. And I can honestly say by doing that, the world just opens up to you as long as you open up to it. So if you're thinking about doing something, then I really do encourage you to just take the leap and put yourself forward and get it done. All right, last thing, if you haven't yet subscribed and you're watching on YouTube, please do that and maybe even hit the like button. All right, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's go. So pretty much 1 year ago today, um, we recorded the first episode of the Lost and Found podcast, and you were the first guest. And it was only right to me that we do a birthday episode, and it had to be with you. So I hope you know that every year from now on, you've at least got to be on at the beginning of January.
It's my honor. And yes, please, always, brother. I'm always here for a discussion with you.
Yeah, amazing, man. It's great when you see how many podcasts start, and apparently, like, there's only a small percentage that get past episode 7.
Yeah.
So I just released 33. I've already shot 34 and 35.
Tell me this
So
is 37. Is this 37?
I think I'm actually going to bring this one out before.
Okay.
So it's actually lined up with 1 year later. So I think this
Okay.
will come out as 34, I believe.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Is,
Yeah, that's perfect.
is 37 a significant number?
Yeah, well, so my life path number is 7, and I am 37, so 3 7s. And this year, the past year was a 7 year. And this has been the most transformative year of my life. So,
That's amazing, man.
the divine synchronicities and all the things, right?
Yeah, yeah. So before we hit record, I was asking if there's anything you wanted to get into today, and you speaking of divine synchronicities, some of the things you were talking about really kind of lined up with some of the exact things I was writing today. I was actually in the car dealership because my car was being serviced, so they have like different areas there where you can set up for work, and I ended up just like writing for a couple of hours and just thinking about something specifically, and it was actually very aligned with what you were saying was been alive for you again, of
Mm.
course. So I'm looking forward to getting into it as always, brother, and thanks again for being here for the third time, but 1 year on from the very first one last year.
Yeah, yeah. Let's roll, man. So, what do you want to dive into first?
I mean, you were talking about seeing the world through energy, and I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So, when you think about that, your perception, right, of reality is what creates reality, and ultimate reality is really just energy, right? So, it's the formless world, and the formless world is what creates the form. And everything that we see around us is energy in form. Now, when we perceive the world around us as being fixed, as being solid, without movement, without vibration, then it becomes a very rigid and cold world. How that shows up in people's lives is different, but for me, it makes it seem as if there's a lack of connection. That's the best way to describe it. There's a lack of connection with my environment. There's a lack of connection with other people. There's a lack of connection with nature. And ultimately, our intuition is informed by and through energy. So if you think about your energy centers or the chakras, each one of them has a responsibility to detect, your reality. And it's detecting the vibration of the reality, the vibration of the space that you're in. And that vibration being detected then informs the mind of what's in the space you're in. Starting with the root. The root is, or the red, it's detecting whether the experience or the environment you're in is safe or not. And then going up into the sacral, now we're starting to, how do we feel about this environment with the safety or lack of safety? And then into the yellow, how confident are we in our environment and ourselves? And then into the green, how open, how loving are we of this environment? To the blue, how well can we speak our truth in this environment? And then the indigo, right? How well are we connected with the divine, with our divine source in the environment? Now, I say this because when you start to realize that the first detection of an environment isn't what your mind thinks about it, it's what the energy of the environment is, and the energy is informing the mind, then you can start to target your inner work towards these energy centers, knowing that each one of these energy centers is responsible for a portion of the mind. And where I'm at now, in an understanding, and this understanding is in no way higher, better than anyone else. It's just what I've come to through this experience, is that the only true safety is in the heart. The only true safety is love. So when we can move out of the red and the orange and the yellow, and we activate the green, when we activate the heart center, that energy of love washes away all your worries, all your anxieties, all your fears, and all of that is coming from an imbalanced root. So a lot of people want to go to the root and try and balance their root, even in this work. But the only way to balance is through love. So when you start to see the world as energy, you start to become more in tune with your own intuitive gifts. And you start to trust yourself more. Right? So a lack of trust isn't trusting what you're doing. It's not trusting what you're saying. It's trusting the feeling that you're exactly where you're supposed to be and everything's okay. And when we're met in that environment that feels unsafe, our intuition is actually the first thing to tell you. I'll say, I don't know, something's a little bit off here. Or maybe you meet somebody, something's a little bit off here. And again, how many times in my life I can count hundreds before coming to this realization of times where my intuition was saying, and I did it anyway. And then later on was like, I knew that was going to happen. And then I didn't trust myself, so I lost trust and faith in my own self, which then you lose the respect for yourself. So we've been conditioned to, again, look outside of ourselves for the answer. And the trick's on us because we are the answer, right? It's a big cosmic joke. And it begins at the origin of understanding your own perceptions of the energy that is flowing through you, and also how you want to direct the energy outward, right? So epigenetics, we can talk about that for seeing your environment influences the energy that you experience. So uh, if you let's say you go to work and you work in a cubicle, just stepping into that environment creates your mind to start thinking certain things because that environment has conditioned you based off the energy of the environment to be a certain way in that environment, right? Um, but when you become this in tune to understanding that you're creating the environment, then it's much easier for me to go into that same environment where I once might have felt instant stress, um, or resistance, and then just sit in it and say, no, I'm the creator of this environment and transforming the environment to how I want to be. So this is where the source of power is, right? Love and power go hand in hand. And this ability to see this way opens up ways of thinking that you've never thought before. You get access to the information that was always present, you just couldn't see it, right? When we were talking about synchronicities earlier, I have had so many synchronicities show up since the last time that we talked. And it's because I'm looking everywhere for them now instead of just where I think they're going to show up. So it's come to a point where, brother, you're God talking to me right now, right? The ocean, the water is God talking to me. The seagulls, the trees, every person I run into is that. And when I see God in everything, I can find the synchronicities again that were always there. I just wasn't looking for them.
It's amazing because right this moment is a live, in real time example of the synchronicities. And whenever I do the podcast, I always kind of go into it with the trust and faith that the right things are going to present themselves. And this might be the most synchronized one that's happened yet. So, first of all, I fucking love you. And
I fucking love you too, brother.
I wrote this down today. Let me share some of this with you. So, the world you see doesn't exist. So, capital T truth, this is accurate. However, what we see creates our experience of reality. So, it exists in our mind, which is the only place that matters to the experiencer. So, the only place the world in which you see exists is in your mind. This realization highlights that we create our reality by how we see things, and that allows us into the enter of choice of how we see. Next thing. The thoughts I'm having are not my thoughts. They belong to the field of thought. So, I'm just going to just kind of read out
Yeah,
where it
please.
goes.
I'm loving it. Yeah.
So, even the term my thoughts reinforces the thoughts as belonging to me. If they are mine, there is more identification and ownership, making them as me, which is the nature of the ego. It is to separate. The ego desires to have and to own. So my thoughts, right? So rephrase this. Maybe something like the thoughts I'm having. But if they belong to the field of thought, am I experiencing them or are the thoughts experiencing me? So, a little hypothesis. If thoughts belong to the field of thought, do levels of thought exist in different fields? Do certain thoughts only exist in certain fields, which could be paradigms, levels of consciousness? Is the determining factor to what thoughts enter me come down to the paradigm I'm attuned to? If all thought vibrate and calibrate at a certain frequency, then the host and the field have to match for the thought to enter the host. If so, trying to change thoughts from the same paradigm slash frequency slash vibration is incredibly hard because I'm almost not choosing them. I'm aligned to a certain field or frequency of thought that is entering me. The only focus needs to be on the level of consciousness I'm attuned to. My attunement equals my frequency. This equals the thoughts that are able to move through or enter me because they have to match. So does thought equal state, or does state equal thought? My hypothesis is that the only thing that is required to change the thoughts I experience is the level of consciousness I am in. This is what will alter and shape my experience of life. First, internally, so energy, thoughts, feelings, which will influence behaviors. The behaviors will then align with the paradigm and create a life situation that is a resonant frequency. I pulsate an energetic frequency based on the internal attunement. In ways, I'm a tuning fork, maybe rather a tuning vessel. And whatever the vessel is attuned to is what can enter and be expressed. Um, and then I got to, and this is, it kind of gets even more like to what you were just saying. So I put, imagine, because I'm getting my car serviced, an engine mapping. It gets plugged in, coded, and attuned. The hardware didn't change. So how do we remap? How do we plug in and set the attunement to the vibratory field or level of consciousness? So one way is consciousness expanding substances. So the clue is in the title, they expand consciousness. But then we have state meditation, chakra meditations. And then I wrote down, heart is the bridge, question mark. I put, although we associate thoughts with the mind and coming from the brain, what if they are connected to self, the lower three chakras, and they affect the brain? Intelligence, thought, self, just writing just notes, intelligence, thought, self. Intelligent thought gets us as far as reason, but beyond here, it seems as though we have to move from thought, where I believe I'm like, actually, we think they come from the brain, but are they coming from the lower three chakras? We have to then transcend that. We have to move into the heart. So that's as far as I got. I'm like,
What a beautiful understanding. Uh,
um,
may I comment?
yeah, please.
So there's a lot, and a lot popped up for me, so I'm going to do my best. The attunement is yes, you're an instrument, right? So if all thoughts and all information are available to you, it's a matter of your openness to receive those thoughts. Listening is a form of receiving. How can you learn anything if you don't listen? How can you learn from a higher state of consciousness, your higher self, whatever you want to call it, God, if you're talking all the time, if your mind is chattering all the time, if your mind is saying it knows? It's impossible. So the skill of listening and being able to quiet the mind to nothing, and actually this has worked well for me, is not only that, but to quiet my mind, try this in meditation. Meditate and then act like you're listening. You shut off your mind just by doing that. And then I started to act as if each one of my energy centers was listening. So I'll look into those things, and my red and my orange, like they would be like open, like they were like, it was like an ear almost, and my whole body was attuned to listening. And through that, I've accessed and became a channel, and have channeled and are channeling at this point, which has been a very, very interesting experience because it requires full surrender. It requires trust and faith to not know what's coming through, and to trust that what is coming through is what needs to be said and is the information that I seek. So even though I'm here and I'm Zack, accessing all the information might come from outside of me, but it only comes outside of me when I realize that I'm one with that information. Then there's no separation. Then the attunement or vibrating at the level of that thought becomes possible because we're listening and we're open. Now, I want to discuss the ego. And I want anybody that's open to this possibility, but we're going to have a discussion that I know that a lot of people have had in the spiritual community, which that the ego is an illusion. Okay. But if I were to go to you and tell you that I have no ego, First thing that happens, man, that guy's got such a big ego. He thinks he has no ego. Right? So think about the ego as an illusion. What a shapeshifter we've created it to be. Not even in our own identity, but like how many definitions have we created about the ego that's psychological, that's spiritual, and each person putting their own spin on what it is. So here's my understanding of how there's no ego. There's the conditioned self, and then there's the capital S self. And that's it. So you're born as the capital S self, and then you're born into an environment in which you are conditioned. This condition creates your character. And all the lessons and everything that you learn, right, are all the conditioning of the environment. At some point, you awaken and you start the process of remembering. Well, what are you remembering? You're remembering the capital S self before the conditioning. Now, the reason why I talk here is if I were to identify with love, would you think that was egoic?
The immediate thing would be no. However, I feel like there's some complexity to this.
There is. There is. The complexity is that identification has nothing to do with ego. Identification is, in the truest form, is having faith, believing, and then receiving, and then identification occurs. So if I have faith that something is real, and then I believe in that thing, and I put my energy and my will and my attention to it, and then the reality that I'm in confirms it, law of correspondence brings it to me, then I start to identify with that thought. Is that identification serving me? Yes, in this case, it is. I mean, you can do the same thing. This is neutral. I'm talking neutralities, right? So you can do this with something that doesn't serve you. But if it serves me, then in that sense, identification is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that we need a certain identity for a certain time before we peel back the layer of what isn't needed, right? So what I noticed was when I started to refer to my ego as my conditioned self,
Mm-hmm.
all my conditioning came forward. Very easy to see.
Yeah.
It was very easy to see what wasn't my capital S self and what was the conditioning. And that has been a catapult, a springboard for my own internal awareness of self and the integration of shadow work and the principles that I use inside of there. But I just wanted to give that explanation on the ego because, interestingly enough, again, it can be the character, it can be the person you're playing, it can be identification, it can be the whatever, like all these different things. But really, if you just break it down to conditioned self and self, you see the polarity inside of you. The conditioning is the shadow, the capital self is the light. And the more I go into my conditioning and transmute the shadow into light, the more I am love.
Yeah. I really like that, man. I really like that. And again, it's just beautiful. the the just the timing of this because yesterday I was writing this down in our notes. One moment. Let me get this up because I was like, this is interesting. So basically, how often are we experiencing reality in the world versus I'm experiencing myself experiencing the world? Meaning, all of the conditioning that I have to everything, I'm actually experiencing my conditioning rather than experiencing what's actually happening.
Yeah. So, first thing, the conditioning again isn't good or bad. Matter of fact, the conditioning is what led you back to who you are. You had to know what you weren't, right, to know what you are. So that's what the conditioning does. Is it gives you that look at it. Also, pre-incarnated agreement. What happens in conditioning is a part of your lessons needing to be learned. And I've even come to the point where I'm like, I don't know if this is a school. Like, I realize that's an easy way to describe it, but like, if we remember, then there is nothing to be learned because you already know it. You can only remember something that you already know. So when we refer to a lesson, that's referring to the fact that I didn't know it and I learned something, right? So those two are at odds. But I still, and again, I'm not without conditioning. Like every moment, every experience brings me a new condition to interpret.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the perception that I have to interpret that conditioning that shifts how I am from it, right? Example, it could be raining outside. I could go outside and I could say, oh my God, it's raining. This is great. And I can start dancing in the rain. Or I can go outside. Oh my God, it's raining. Let me get an umbrella. It's going to be a terrible day. Rain is neutral. My perception of that, right, of rain is what creates the conditioning of how I'm going to respond to that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to repeat a parable in the best way I can from the Raw Contact Teaching the Law of One, which is going to be able to sum this up. So the questioner in the Law of One, it's chapter 56, he essentially asks Ra, why do we lose our memory, conscious memory, when we come into incarnation? And Ra says, imagine that you're at a poker table and you're here to play the game, but you can see all the cards of the game, all the players. You would win every time, but you would eventually lose interest in the game. It would no longer be something you'd want to do. So, not knowing the other player's cards is what makes the game challenging, is what makes the game fun. But now think about the longest poker game imaginable, a lifetime. And instead, the cards are anger and love and limitation and grief and sadness. And in this space, all the cards are open to the eye. And to win this game, you look at every single card with all your cards face up transparently. You say, I love you. This is the game. To love, to know, to accept, and forgive, and to know that all the experiences of conditioning have brought you to winning that realization. So, that to me is how do you recondition? It's back to the one source. Every experience that you've ever had was created from love and by love. And until you move through it to that realization, that's the end. That's the end game.
Yeah, I really feel that deeply. It resonates. And I was having a conversation just earlier with a close friend of mine after I was kind of writing these things down, and I wanted to just bounce some ideas with him. And I was saying, can you imagine that if we enter into a fear state and we're trying to actually solve a problem and we're literally in that level of consciousness, what thoughts are we going to have? Are we gonna have loving thoughts when we're in fear? And I was really just thinking about this realization today is really my only focus. Maybe not only, but I'm going to go with it anyway. Let's just say this. If my only focus each day was tuning myself into the state of being fully open and in love, what would the quality of my life be? What would the quality of my thoughts be? My feelings, my actions, my behaviors, my interactions? What would life look like if my primary focus was opening myself to be in that field of love? So that's literally the thing out of all of this is what I came to.
So, this is where we enslave ourselves from the ability to let go because we are not targeting forgiveness to the causality to be able to let go. So, this is what I mean by that. As you have an experience that is, and I want to say this as well, I'm choosing not to use the word trauma except for the rephrasing of the word in a description. So we have some experiences that have a low energetic resonance for us, right? Things like driving your car. You don't have much of an emotional response to driving your car. Now, if you're in traffic, it might be different, right? But there's experiences that we have that keep us neutral. And then there's experiences that we have that have a large energetic resonance in that time period, right? Which is actually what creates what we call trauma. But what if instead of calling it trauma, we said, I had an experience that had an energetic resonance that has caused me pain and suffering? The reason why I say that is because trauma has been also used almost like the ego, right? And it's like, well, what is what at this point? Now, let's say you have that type of experience, and then you resist the expression from the emotions of that experience. Let's use grief, because grief is a very common one at this point. So somebody dies, somebody you love. And in our world, you plan your funeral, you go to the funeral, it might be a 2-day event, and then you're expected to go back to work. You don't you don't allow yourself enough time to grieve. So you hold it in, and you hold it in, and you hold it in. So you're literally, what you resist will persist. You're holding in the emotion. I'm going to use my hands here. You're holding in the emotion and it's stuck. And the resistance of not wanting to feel the emotion or avoiding feeling the emotion through work allows it to get bigger and bigger and bigger. You compound the grief. You compound it, you compound it, you compound it until this energy also has its own intelligence. And this intelligence of this energy that's in the body is informing the mind consciously. And this is what you would consider the things that are on the outskirts of your conscious mind, your subconscious, right? So this is where our mental battles occur. So if you have this energy that's informing the mind of this past experience that has not been grieved yet, so you can't let it go, it's very difficult for you to just choose love and be loved, because you haven't, this is bypassing, right? So you actually haven't gone through the process of healing from that energy to get that energy out of the body. Now, this is where strategies of somatic release, like breath work and things like this, things are starting to come forward to help expel that energy. But what I've found is that people will go to one breathwork session and think they've healed like 16 years of something, and they're like, "Oh, I'm good," and then they feel good for the moment because that energy has become smaller, but then they still haven't fully healed from it. So they go back to the next day, and that it's still informing the conscious mind, and you're still resisting it, still denying it, and then you just make it bigger again, right? So forgiveness, when targeted to the cause rather than the effect, is the thing that actually works. Here's what I mean. Let's say in the same example, your loved one had died, and you regretted saying something to this loved one before they died, and you're experiencing regret. And as you experience the regret, you start getting angry at yourself for saying the thing that you said to this person, right? Now you want to start working on forgiveness. And you say, you know what? And I'll use an example of phrase. Let's just use something simple. I hate you, right? When you really didn't. It was just a moment. And you say, I want to forgive myself for hating this person, right? I forgive myself for saying I hate you. That's trying to forgive the effect of what's keeping it in. What's keeping it in at cause is that you are angry with yourself for saying that you hate this person. So if you just try and say, I forgive myself for saying I hate this person, you'll do that over and over and over again because you're not targeting the energy that is keeping the resistance and keeping it stuck. But if I switch that to, I forgive myself for being angry at myself for saying that I hate this person, that's when it works. So the cause is anger and probably guilt and shame in that regard, right? This thing that creates this thing. And directing of forgiveness is what's known as the end of karma. To be able to forgive is the ending of karma. And karma is just the inertia of a pattern that continues, right? Until you become aware of what the cause of the pattern is. And then you forgive yourself for the cause. And that is what washes away the energy. So I want to share some experiences that I've had doing rituals now. I'm here at a psilocybin retreat that I ran yesterday, and I've also started to do what I'm calling Bathed by Grace. It's a ritualistic bath that I've done for myself now, with learning how to invoke grace through my heart and calling in a channel through intention of what I would like to release. So if I were to run through the process yesterday, I had everybody come up with an intention And the intention was centered around forgiveness. So there was a process to find what they'd like to forgive themselves for. Then there's a frame that I use. So I forgive myself. My intention is to forgive myself for XYZ, being angry with myself, shaming myself, whatever it is. And then say I openly and willingly accept all things needed for my intention to manifest. All things are possible through God, divine, source, Christ, whatever you want to say. And so it is. What I had them do is they came up with their mind, and then they came up to me before the ceremony, and I had them put their arms by their side. And then I said, when you focus your intention on your heart, and when you feel it focused on your heart, bring your hands to prayer center. They brought their hands to prayer center, they opened their eyes, and they read their intention. Yesterday, as we performed some rituals, I watched nuclear bombs of energy leave people's bodies. I mean, it was like this little thing, this ball, all of it gone. And I watched them wake up from the experience like a child, like they had just awoken inside of this reality and instantly know it was an illusion. And every single one of them had their intention manifest through the process. Now, I've developed a skill, and it's not even. I'm still learning how to communicate it. It's not me. It's through the channel of being able to lay my hand on someone else's heart and to help purge the energy out of the person. And what's really cool is we got it all on video. I had 6 or 7 people lying down in the grass, and I went to each person and did it with them. And they all responded back with the exact same. They had the same experience of what happened, and felt the exact same way. So this channel that I've gotten access to, and again, I'm still working on how to speak about it because again, it's not me. I've been able to direct it, and I was using it for myself first. So I would like to actually say that, hey, if you want to try what I'm about to say, because that was in group ritual, which we're welcome to dive in further. But this is the bathed by grace. Set a bath, get some salt, Epsom salt. Put 3 half cups of Epsom salt in the warm bath. Have some incense. Have some earth, right, and a candle. So you have all the elements there. Find out what it is that you would like to forgive yourself for. What the cause is. I'll use an example for myself. I had made some what I thought to be mistakes with my finances in 2021, and it created financial stress for me. And what I did was essentially in the crypto market, I had a lot of money invested and I didn't pull in time. And I could have pulled a lot of money based off what it was there. And I kept beating myself up and beating myself up. And I started to realize that I was angry at myself for not knowing any better. Now, consciously, I know that that doesn't serve me and it doesn't make sense. But subconsciously, being angry at myself over and over again started to lodge that experience into my body. So I do the candles, and then I do the same thing. I put my hands together. I focus my attention on my heart. I say I intend to forgive myself for being angry at myself for not knowing any better. I'm willing to accept all things needed for that intention to manifest. All things are possible through you, Father, and so it is. And then there's a breath of righteousness. So it is. I go, and so it is. I immediately step into the bath and I lay down and I surrender. And then all of a sudden my mouth opens like this. And an energy comes into my body. The first thing that happens is my body instantly starts to scream. It was the deepest, most, I've never heard my body make this noise before. It was coming from the there was like I was screaming and there was a sharp, like deep resonance that was in the middle of this. It was like if the scream was this big, there was this thing that was like right in the middle of it, that was like vibrating as it was coming out. And my body screamed for probably 5 to 10 minutes, again, in full surrender. Then I cried, went from screaming to, it's what's called a cathartic release, but so I'm going to cry. And then I moved, and then I started laughing hysterically at how ridiculous it is to even be angry at myself. So it was like I had the human experience of expressing out the energy of what was stuck. And then my divine self allowed me to laugh at the experience. And then it all washed away and it was gone. So I started to realize the full way of healing is when you can express the real human experiences and cry about it and scream about it and do everything you need to do. That's one level of expression and purging energy. And then laughing about it, bringing in the joy and the love into that space that it once held inside of you. And it's the full spectrum of the polarity, from anger and shame to peace, love, and joy. And when both of those emotions can be put towards a past experience, that's with forgiveness, it washes away and it no longer has control over you. You're no longer enslaved by your own doing. And then it's much easier to be able to sit in the morning, choose love, set the intention of being that, because you no longer have the mental chatter of what you're resisting and what you're avoiding with you. And it unifies your will to be able to be in that space more consistently.
That's incredible, man. Thank you for sharing that. And I know, sometimes it can be difficult to like talk about these types of things because it's almost ineffable, right? It's really hard to explain it in ways, especially the channeling piece. I've had those experiences too, and certainly this time last year, I was many times a day I was experiencing that, and I still have access to that, but sometimes I almost forget,
Yeah.
and then I have to remind myself. When, for example, and I was thinking this, it's almost like the power of humility is when we realize that it's not I have to go to my brain and think about all the things. When I open myself, there's this pouring of information, and that humility is so powerful because it's liberating. So
Yeah.
liberating to know that it's not just little me trying to figure all this out. That actually I am one with the all, and in that kind of surrender to that, it's so liberating.
Yeah. So now that I've had some, what I believe to be, well, the purest experience I've had so far with humility is that humility and gratitude are one and the same. They're just the same thing of a different coin. And that when I put myself into humility, into being humble, the next emotion immediately is gratitude. It's I'm humbled and I'm grateful. And those two are so intertwined and connected. And when I move into humbled and grateful, the next thing that comes through is I receive something new. And that's what I have to humble myself to receive it. And then the gratitude happens, and I receive something, and then the gratitude just it explodes, it expands.
And it's interesting because a lot of people might associate the idea of being humbled with being knocked down a peg.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, in my felt sense, is that to be humbled is to really raise above. It's going up the
Mm-hmm.
the levels of consciousness. It's going into higher paradigms. To be truly humble is
Mm-hmm.
is a pretty high frequency, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. It's the being of a student always, and realizing that there's no finish line. The moment you think you've arrived is the moment that you limit yourself from the next access of information that you would like. And we're not all truly healed until we're back one with the Creator in some densities higher than our own that we're not currently experiencing in this incarnation. But the access, from what I can tell, to the what I believe to be fourth density, and I always say that the law of one raw contact is what I consider my dogma, and I'm aware that it is. But I like to say that I don't know what the truth is, but I know the closer I get to the truth, the more love and happiness and joy I feel in my life. And this book has never led me to anywhere but that. So the explanation that we're moving from third density to fourth density and we're in an overlapping period right now is why we're seeing this massive awakening. And again, a part of fourth density is transparency. All the cards, all the players are open to the eye. Everybody knows everything about everyone. Because how can you be one with yourself if you don't know everything about who you are? How can you be one with others if you don't know everything about who they are? And not only to be transparent, but no matter what the cards are, I love you. This is unconditional love. So we're seeing transparency, this frequency of transparency awakening everyone. Well, not everyone, but those who are ready. But we're also seeing the corruption being brought forward. It's so much easier to see the drama and the play that's being put on in the world stage, right? And before we couldn't see it. Think about how strong the two-party system was even 10 years ago, even 20 years ago. And now how you can see that the two-party system, neither one of them is quote unquote right. They both have the same agenda, just a different way of saying it. And that agenda is separation, division, which creates confusion and chaos for the masses. And until we see that and see for what it is and choose to be clear about trusting ourselves, because by trusting myself and loving myself, I love God and I trust God. That's the only pathway is in. And we've known that for a while. But it's just giving you another pathway to that knowing.
Yeah, it seems as though, like, I wonder in this time of awakening, if, as with the law of polarity, as more people awaken, I wonder if there will be more of the opposite that we start to see, maybe more conflict, but maybe that's like a necessary part
Yes.
of the process.
Yep. You
Almost
can't
like
have,
the structures are fragile.
yeah.
They're getting close to breaking.
You can't have clarity without chaos. One can't exist without the other. So although when I see and I'm always in reverence and recognition that I'm sitting right now off the Atlantic coast of Florida, looking at the beach, while in Jerusalem and or Israel and Palestine, people are suffering, dying, starving, all of these things. People in Ukraine, same thing. People in North Korea, people in these states, China, people in these states that have enslaved their people to believe something that isn't true. And so the conflict ensues. But we're seeing more chaos in the collective because of this, because we must have the chaos. It must come forward in transparency so it is seen. And when it is seen, we can do something with it. This is the same thing as this is the world's shadow, right? I can't transform something I am not aware of. So bringing the shadow forward to light and saying, oh, I see it now. Now I can choose against it. Here's my shadow. Choosing against it is choosing my light. So in the collective, the shadow is coming forward. And now we're getting the option to see, is this really what we want our world to be? Do we want our world to be in conflict, killing each other over differences that people feel to be so righteous that are absolutely ridiculous?
Differences that don't make a difference.
It just perpetuates the pattern.
Yeah.
You know how the pattern ends in Israel and Palestine? Forgiveness. They stop, they forgive each other for their past, they forgive each other in their moment, and they choose to move forward and see clearly that they're the same, doing the same thing that we've always done.
And to your point, and forgive themselves, right?
Firstly,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's something that I heard earlier which was beautiful. And it was, let me just find this and read it out so I get it right. Feeling guilt is rejecting God's willingness to forgive you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that comes from religious conditioning, especially in Christianity, right? God's grace is that you can do whatever you want to do in incarnation because it's your free will and my desire to experience myself infinitely. So, you can do whatever you want. I still love you. You can murder somebody. I still love you. You can be addicted to porn for 16 years. I still love you. You can have your ex-wife tell you, or you can have your ex-wife want to kill yourself in front of your eyes, and you can shame yourself and guilt yourself all you want. I still love you. God's grace is eternal love, unconditional love for us, and He's just waiting on us to forgive ourselves.
Mm. Yeah, for me, that still being loved, the way I've experienced that before now is no matter what I've gone through, what guilt I've felt, is that there's actually always a path for me to re-enter into that openness, to experience that heavenly feeling. And to me, that's the felt experience of living in a way where I'm still loved. And that is the forgiveness that I'm actually, no matter what's ever happened, I actually can re-enter that. To me, that is like that love.
Yeah, yeah, and it's when we start seeing what the power of forgiveness and what it really is, and again, being able to target it in a space that is most effective, and you experiencing it work, it's just like I identify with it. I identify with it because the result that I've experienced is expansion and love and a quiet mind. My
Mm.
mind rarely chatters or speaks or thinks unless I want it to. It's by will alone that I set my mind in motion. So these are the things that the world needs. And I'll tell you, brother, yesterday was the best day of my life here. It was a day that I lived in complete purpose of why I'm here. And then we talk about abundance. We're talking about abundance for this. I had an experience sometime in December where this beam of light came down through my crown and pierced all the way to my root and expanded inside of me. And I was talking to myself, but I was talking to God within me. And he said, "What do you want?" I said, "I just want all the resources I need to be able to spread the word of God to what I know it to be." And he said, "Well, how about winning the lottery?" I said, "Yeah, that sounds about right." Now, this 2 hour experience was much more than just that, but I went and I bought a lottery ticket the next day. I didn't win the lottery in that way. I got disappointed. I thought I was crazy when I was in that experience. It was like, was this just my ego tricking me to believe I'm having an experience? Or is this real? Since then, I've been invited to 4 different retreats. I met a gentleman who I'd love to hook you up with. His name's Sean Clayton. His Instagram is abundance10,000. He lives in Austin. The synchronicities of him living in Austin just occurred. I go to meet him for coffee, and then we go on a double date for dinner. And then he's doing a podcast, and I was like, essentially it came together that we're going to partner in the podcast. I go to his place. He's made millions of dollars in marketing. He awoke. He wants to create exactly what I want to create. He has all the resources for us to create. I'm going to start a podcast with him, and we're going to start shadow work and coaching and community. He's gained 55,000 followers in his first year because he's using all of his marketing resources. He has a content creator, a COO. He has an assistant. He has an email writer. He has a funnel designer. He has everything. And he's willingly, openly partnering with me and just giving it to me so that we can do work together. The gentleman that I'm here with said, "You want to come out to this retreat?" He allowed me to design the retreat. when we got done, he now wants to go and buy space in Austin to get a studio to create massive amounts of content. He's coming in early February, and we're going to be doing these retreats, getting them bigger every single month. And he's made all of his money in marketing. He's about to exit his company, and he wants to do this. There's the lottery. I know I have nothing to worry about. I know that the faith that I've had is being I'm being given. Ask and you shall receive. And yesterday was a confirmation of a communion with God that I've never experienced before. And I'm so grateful, and I'm so humbled and excited about what's next.
Brother, it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me because when you are aligned with love, then again, that vibratory state, it's only a matter of time before it finds the same. And especially when you're coming from a place of wanting to create from that place for the right reasons, I think people maybe miss that the missing, to me, the missing key to the manifestation piece is love, is being aligned with love. And so it, like, first of all, I'm so happy to hear that. It's amazing. And it's interesting because I was going to talk to you about something when we finish recording, which again is like, as you say that, I'm like, it's not surprising that I was going to, like, just with what you're saying, like, I was actually going to talk to you about something separate that I'm kind of creating in the background with some people. Um, yeah,
The
it's amazing.
synchronicities, brother.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to give the listeners something that came through for this whole winning the lottery thing, and I'm actually going to create a guided meditation for it because. So I used to want to, with abundance, they're like, imagine that you have all the money and it's already yours, right? And I would do that, and like I was like, all right, I'm grateful to receive $500 million in my bank account. Right, and in my mind, 500 million is enough for me is abundance for me, right? I realize that's a limit, but that's just what I chose. And then I started to realize through my own meditation of saying it, actually it was a realization, and I was shown simultaneously. What started to happen is I started to see what I would do with the money. And then when I started to see these scenes of what I would do to the money, I was automatically grateful. The visions created gratitude and love. So before, I would try and visualize my bank account with the money and then manufacture the emotion of gratitude to that, and it wasn't working. But when I sat back and said, okay, I've already received the money, and I have like scenes of like doing group rituals like what I just did, but larger. I have scenes of speaking on stage in front of thousands of people. I have scenes of traveling the world. I have scenes of being on a private jet and being able to take Julia wherever I want to take her and feeling that abundance and not having any shame towards what that used to be for me. Because to speak the word of God, I need to travel, and I need to travel most efficiently. And all these scenes started showing up, and all that was happening was gratitude, love, joy. So instead of in abundance, instead of thinking about what you want to receive, think about what you want to do with what you're going to receive. Because that alone shows that you already have it. Because you can only give away what you have. So go to what you're going to give away, and what you need will come.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And on abundance, there was something that I often kind of consider, and it's that if I look back throughout my life, whatever I've actually needed, I've always been given.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've not needed a lot, maybe I've not received a lot. But when the need has actually been there, it always finds a way through.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that, historically, that really has been the
Yeah.
case. And it's like, I was thinking this recently, that is like, that abundance is everywhere all around.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not in your pocket, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And it doesn't mean that you can't just reach out and access it. The same way that all of the oxygen you could possibly ever need is always around you. You don't have to store it all in your lungs. All you actually have to do is know. In the knowing that it's there, you inhale it.
Mm-hmm.
Just you inhale, and then also you give it away freely without the fear that you're not going to get it back again.
Mm-hmm.
There's no fear around it. And it's actually the thing we need most, right? We need air more than anything. And the thing that we need more than anything, we don't have any fear around, or scarcity around it, because we're not having to believe there's an abundance of air. It's a knowing. We know it is. So there's no fear. So we take all that we need, we give all that we need, and all that we need still remains. And I feel like there's something similar in that, like what you just said about see what you're going to give away. It's like knowing that it's not something you have to hoard. Like, got to hold on to this. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it comes in, it goes out, it flows through me, and it's just maybe a different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, it is about receiving. It's about you're blocking yourself, whoever's listening, by doubting what you want.
Mm,
The doubt is what creates the block to receive it. Because an open channel of receiving is, here you go, thank you. That's an
mm,
open channel of receiving. Here you go. I don't know if that's exactly what I want it to be.
mm,
We block ourselves from receiving more because of our own idea of what it looks like compared to what actually the universe is giving us or what God is giving us. So think about this: when you, let's say you're in meditation and you in your heart, you say, we'll use money again. I want to make $500 million, and then automatically the universe creates a map. Says, here's how you're going to get there. Bing. But then your mind thinks it knows better, and it's like, well, I'm going to go over here. And then you keep getting hit with resistance, and you keep getting hit with resistance until it exhausts you. And you
mm.
start to say things like, I'm a failure, manifestation isn't real, and no matter what I do, I can't seem to get to this barrier, and what's wrong with me? And you start doubting yourself more as you keep hitting that resistance, when the universe already created a map, and it's over here. And what that resistance is doing is it's making you resist to submit and to surrender to this path. And then the flow of water, right? It's ease to get to where you want to get to. And the biggest block is, you think it looks like this, it really looks like this,
Yeah.
and you think you know better than God. And that is pride.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think that's spot on. I was saying this to my beloved Colette a couple of days ago, is that everything we possibly want to align ourselves with in life and the way in which we want to experience life, like the way to do that already exists. It's just unseen.
Mm.
So we have to be open to being able to see that which we can't yet see.
Yeah. Which is faith.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah,
fool's game,
yeah.
right? So the archetype of the fool. So it's not, it is, and of course it is foolish. It is foolish to believe in something you can't see.
Mm,
But I think back to, again, just want to. There's a few different experiences with Jesus in the Bible that really set out to me, but the one that really set out the story is that Jesus taught his apostles how to do these healings, and they go out and they attempt to heal a boy from being sick, and they're unable to do it. And they go back to Jesus and they say, Jesus, Master, why weren't we able to heal this boy? We weren't able to do it. And his response, I think it's Matthew 17:20, he says, because you have so little faith. He didn't say, because I'm the Son of God and you are not. He didn't say, because I'm the chosen one and you are not. He literally says, because you had so little faith. And what I've experienced inside of this healing channel that I go is that it is not me.
Mm-hmm.
I have the moment that I want to direct what I want it to do to my personal will is the moment where I get out of the channel. And it's a full surrender. So I fully surrender for myself, and I'll have my hand on the person's heart. I fully surrender. And then from there, everything that's going through and happening, I'm being informed intelligently, but I'm not directing it. I'm being told what's happening rather than me telling what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really that's where I've come to these understandings of listening. Surrender is listening, and it's being humbled and grateful to be guided by something. Well, I think that's not even giving it the giving God what God's due. It's being guided by God, but knowing that you're God's self guiding God's self to do work for God, and there's no separation between it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the experience I've had with it, where, I've had experiences where I've been about to say what I was thinking, and then
Mm-hmm.
I opened myself up to receive, and almost the opposite came through. I was like, oh, that was off.
Mm-hmm.
But what
Mm-hmm.
came through, the person I was said it to, tears immediately came to their eyes.
Yeah.
So it was on point. But when I was just about to say what first came to my mind, literally, then I paused and the opposite thing came through. I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a drop in if you want to explore the raw contact.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. That book, every time I've listened to it, I'll listen to it, and I'll have some experiences that match it, and I'll go back and listen to it, and I'll understand new parts of it, and I'll have experiences that match it, and I'll go back and listen to it, I'll understand new parts of it. It literally reveals itself through experience, and it's just about putting into practice what's in the book.
Yeah.
And what's in the practice is the law of one, and how you live the law of one, how you live unity. And then the primary source of information that I use is that book. Now, I've also read Course in Miracles and the Kabbalion and Conversations with God, and all of these books that are channeled works have been so impactful in my life. But there's something very special about it that I'll share with you off the podcast for me. But it's dropped in from source that you're gonna find something inside of that material that's really gonna aid you, help you. And that's not just for you, brother. That's for whoever's listening.
Amazing, man. This hour has flown by, and always a pleasure. And it's a testament to you and the commitment that you have to this journey. When we do speak, there's always just new things flowing through, and that just shows that you're actually living this. When we're actually living it, we're not talking about the same thing a few months later. We're in that constant flow of evolution. We are that flow of water. When we are open to receive what is coming through, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's beautiful to see that.
And I appreciate it too, because the first show we did, I talked about self mastery, and that is a perfect example of faith, believe, receive. Because in that moment, from where I am now to where I was, I have mastered more of myself than I did at that time. And during that time, it was more of a concept than integration.
Mm-hmm.
And in this time, I can feel more integration rather than concept. And again, there's no, the beautiful thing about mastery is once you realize is that you're walking a path of mastery until you realize that there was never a path.
Mm.
And that's where I've come to now. It's like, oh, okay, this is just It's just expansive. So there's no path anymore. I'm not walking a path, I'm expanding. And it's internal, and that internal is also external. But there's more to go. Mastery itself is an illusionary term, in a sense of thinking about it as a final space to be. Mastery really is being open and willing to accept and love all experiences and all people. Yeah.
I love that, man. Thank you so much for being here again, brother. 1 year on, it's I'm delighted that we can do this, and so many more to come.
Yeah, brother. It's my honor. Thank you again.
Thanks, man.